It is 2 o'clock. It is Thursday afternoon. It is the 6th day of October. Happy New Year to everybody. A happy 5783. And welcome to Volunteer for Israel's programs. Today is the beginning of Season 5. We first started this in June of 2020. Boy, that was a long time ago. Thanks for hanging with us for 5 seasons. Today is episode number 159. And we're blessed today with Sharona giving us another presentation of her wisdom, and we all appreciate the past ones. Thank you, Sharona. We have a couple of quick announcements. The first one is the Happy New Year announcement to everybody in Japan, in England, and wherever else you happen to be today in Israel. We generally have folks coming from all over the world. Today's program will be a presentation on Pilgrims Road, and it has to do with King Herod and his reign as king, and I'm sure you'll be interested in the whole content from beginning to end. We have today, actually in 17 days, the archaeology program, our 2-week program of VFI Plus Archaeology, the parts. They start on October 23 for 2 weeks, and that program is the last of our VFI Plus programs for this year. For next year, we do have a formal announcement of the dates, which I'm now just going to put up on the screen for anybody who might want to make note. Let's see if it comes up right. There we go. These are the program dates that have been approved for 2023. And you'll notice that we're offering the archaeology program in March and again in October. And in case you're wondering about it, I will show you a bag I have here in a moment and explain what's in it. We're also offering the VFI Plus Advanced program in May and then again in November. And that's a 17-day program which involves 2 weeks on a base and heavy-duty touring with Julia for that during that whole period in an air-conditioned bus and going to some really unusual places. So these are our official program schedules for 2023. They will be up on our website and displayed elsewhere shortly. In addition to that, of course, there's the standard VFI offering, which involves going to Israel for 1, 2, or 3 weeks. And we've been doing that since 1982. And the VFI website to learn more is vfi-usa.org. I mentioned the bag. This is the bag. This is a bag.
We can't see that, Steve.
Can't exactly see it. It's a bag.
You have to hold it in front of your chest. There you go.
Okay. Thank you, Alana. This is a bag of soot. This soot, I can guarantee to you, because I personally gathered it, is from the destruction of the first temple in 586-87 BC. How do I know that? Because I dug this out of the wall at an archaeological site in Old City, Jerusalem, which our folks will be at in about 2.5 weeks. And it is reminiscent of the period of the destruction of the first temple, which also was the beginning of the Babylonian exile. And King Nebuchadnezzar II was the guy who did all the dirty work, burning Jerusalem to the ground. This is an artifact of value to nobody except me, but I just thought I'd show you that you can acquire things like this and be there yourself and do the digging and whatever, and it's extremely enjoyable. Plus, I'd like to leave the thought that if anybody has grandchildren or children that you think might be a nice bonding experience to spend time with, I previously brought my granddaughter, a high school senior, with me in this past March to Israel on the program, and it was a fantastic bonding experience between grandpop and granddaughter. So it's something to consider. It's not a very expensive way to do serious bonding for a couple of weeks with one of your kids or grandkids. Last announcement is that we have enabled closed captioning. And if you look at the bottom of your screen, there's a way that you can click a button and you can watch the text created almost real time by Zoom on a closed caption basis. It's not a translation, it's closed caption. So I thought I'd point that out to anybody who might make value of that. At that point, I'd like to ask Ilana if she has anything to add today. And you're on, yep.
I have nothing to add other than if you are going on a Plus program and you happen to get an email from Johanna or Nancy, just please note that our bus The VFI Plus bus is not going to just drop you off at the train station and then you figure things out. It's going to take you to the bus where Julia will be to take you on a tour, a private bus. So just note that email was sent out to everybody going in October, whether they are VFI Plus or not. So it didn't take us into account.
Great.
That's
Why don't you introduce Sharona?
Okay. All right. So our speaker today is Sharona Liman. Sharona's parents immigrated from Philadelphia to Israel in 1963, where she was born and raised a Sabra. After finishing her military service, she entered into a Land of Israel Studies program at the Beit Berel Teachers College. She received a Bachelor of Education and her official tour guide certification from the Ministry of Tourism in 1995 and has been a tour guide ever since. She's a passionate lover of Israel and specializes in history and archaeology.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
This is the closest to lectures that I've done, right?
Right.
The previous one was not.
Yeah.
Not
you were the last person who spoke to us, I think.
Oh, so you've been schmoozing ever since?
We've been schmoozing.
Okay. So you need to let me share my screen.
Okay.
And we will be touching on Herod, but that's not exactly our topic today.
One second, Steve, if you could, Steve, if you could make me co-host, I'm unable to mute anyone or do anything.
Got it.
Thanks.
I'm still not able to share.
You should be able to share now, Sharona.
Okay.
There you go.
Okay, can you see it on the big screen?
Yes.
Okay. So now you can see that the picture behind me, my background, is similar to what we see here. And we're going to speak about the Pilgrims Highway to Jerusalem, the very, very last leg of it, the last few hundred meters, less than a kilometer before you actually get to the temple itself. You have to remember that during Herod's time, during the Second Temple period, people came from hundreds and thousands of miles away, from Rome, from Athens, from Egypt, from Babylon. And other people came just from Judea and just from the Galilee, but everybody shared these last hundreds of meters. But before we get to the Second Temple period, and before we get to this road, we begin at the beginning. Pilgrimage, in Hebrew, aliyah l'regel, which literally means going up or ascending to the foot. And this is the word we still use in Hebrew today, aliyah l'regel, and it sort of has no connection to what we do today, going into our air-conditioned car and going up to Jerusalem. So there is an idea that this word, this term, comes first of all from the biblical phrase telling us to go up to Jerusalem. All the men have to go to the place that God shows them, to the festival of unleavened bread, which is Passover, of course, Chag HaMatzot, the festival of weeks, which is Shavuot, and the festival of Tabernacle Sukkot, which is going to be our focus today. But before we had Jerusalem, before there was a temple, what did people do? So an archaeologist called Adam Zaltal, who was actually a kibbutznik, grew up in, you would say, a very secular, non-religious background. After 1967, began systematically excavating in the new territories, Judea and Samaria, West Bank, whatever you want to call it. He found many, many, many significant things. The altar at Mount Eival, for instance, that's the peak, the highlight. But he also found 5 sites that if you look at them from above, they look like a giant foot. 5 such sites along the Jordan Valley. And from other artifacts that were found there, he discovered that people did not live there all year round, and they did come for public gathering, for some kind of ritual. And all these feet are always on a top of the hill. So you would actually be ascending, you would actually going up to the foot. And those were probably the places of ritual before Solomon built the first temple, during the time of Joshua and the judges and Saul, and maybe even David. Until there is a central place, these were the places that the people of Israel went up for the holidays, for the festival. Now, the word festival, as I say here, is called, as you know very well, in Hebrew, Chag, very similar to the Arabic Hajj. And what the word, if you know, words in Hebrew have a source, a root. The root for Chag is Chug, which is a circle. And what people would do, they would circle this foot. They would walk around it. And by that, they would show their ownership to the land, their connection to the land, etc., etc. And again, referring to the Muslim Hajj, what people do in the Hajj is go to the Kaaba and circle around it. And we will see this circling again later on in the reference of Sukkot. Okay, when we look at the Bible, God commanded us to go up 3 times. Do we see it? Does it appear in the books? Does it appear in the story? So we do have a very slight reference once for each one of the holidays. When Solomon completes building the temple, he has the first pilgrimage, the inaugurating of this new amazing building, and he calls the tribes and the chiefs and the families, and they bring in the ark. And King Solomon has this festival in the time of the month of Etanim, which is the 7th month, which is the month that we're at now. In Hebrew today, we call it Tishrei. And today it is the first month. We begin the year in this. But in biblical times, the year began in Nisan, sort of April, in the month of Passover. And all the holidays that we are celebrating now, Rosh Hashanah, Yom Kippur, Sukkot, when the Bible talks about it, they talk about the 7th month. And the word Tishrei is a Babylonian word that appeared later on. In the biblical times, the name of the month was Etanim. So we know that the beginning of the celebration, the very, very new temple, everything is still in nylons, everything is brand new. This was during Sukkot. The next referral is King Hezekiah. It's about almost 300 years later, a little less than 300 years after Solomon. And it tells us specifically that he came to the temple of the Lord in Jerusalem to celebrate Passover. So we know already 2 out of the 3. The third one is a little tricky because the name is not mentioned. It doesn't say Shavuot, but we can guess it because the occasion is when the king Josiah, the king that completes the religious reforms that Hezekiah began before him, and finds the book of Deuteronomy and makes Jerusalem the center. And it's almost equivalent of getting the Torah for the first time in Sinai 7 weeks after the Exodus. So it is, although the sentence doesn't say it, and for us to have a nice complete round thing that each one of the pilgrimages, each one of the 3 holidays is mentioned in the Bible, it is nice to think that this occasion of Azeh happened during Shavuot. It fits the content. Okay, so we have these 3 holidays, Sukkot, Pesach, Shavuot, that each one is a commandment from God. It has the religious aspect of the pilgrimage, of the ritual, of the sacrifice. It has the historical point of view, the whole cycle of the Exodus, getting the Torah and the 40 years in the desert. And it has, of course, the agricultural aspect, which means that these holidays have to come in a specific season every year, which is a challenge to the Jewish calendar. I'm sure you all know about this, that every 17 years, in a cycle of 17 years, 4 or 5 times, we have to add a 13th month to the year to make sure that Passover is always in spring. We get to the month where it's Purim, Adar, the 12th month, and we look at the weather and we look at the ground and we look at the length of day, and we decide whether it's really the 12th month, the last month, and next month is going to be Passover, or we're going to add the 13th month, another one, to make sure that Passover is in the correct season, and by that, adjusting between the lunar year and the solar year. Sukkot commemorates the wandering, as we said, in the desert, and the gathering of the fruits and bring them from the field before the rains. It's not the wheat and the barley which we have gathered before. It's the end of the grapes. It is the dates. It's the end of the figs, which we enjoyed the whole summer, and it's the very, very beginning of the olives. This is the season. All these fruits that had flowers between Passover and Shavuot are now, we're either finishing picking them up or beginning. Now, I want to end, of course, before the rain. At the last day of Sukkot, we begin praying for the rain. Now, it's very logical. In a place like Israel, there's no point praying for rain during July and August. It's not going to happen. It's just going to put God in an uncomfortable situation of not being able to fulfill our requests. So it makes sense from the last day of Sukkot and until Pesach. And this is something that I found on YouTube, and I want to share with you, and I'm sure you're going to appreciate it. You do hear it, yes, the music?
Rabbeinu Shalom, our God and God of our ancestors.
Remember Abraham and Sarah, who were drawn to you like water.
Who were blessed as a tree planted near water. Who were rescued from fire and water.
L'kuvet zeh, Shem Kumfas.
Remember Isaac and Rebekah.
He was willing to let his blood be spilled like water.
She was eager to provide the stranger with water.
In the desert, they dug and found wells of water for their sake.
For their sake?
For their sake.
For their sake.
Grant the gift of water.
Remember Jacob and Leah and Rachel.
Who rolled the stone.
Off the mouth of the well of water.
Who wrestled with angels. Fire and water. Who crossed over the water.
Whose tears ran like water.
Who promised to be with them.
Fire and water. For their sake.
For their sake.
For their sake, grant the gift of water.
Remember Miriam and Moses.
Under her watchful eye,
He floated in the water.
they sang as Israel passed through all the water.
He struck the rock.
And you provided water. She brought forth blessings. For their sake, grant the gift of water.
Remember the 12 tribes.
When you brought through the divided water.
For whom you sweetened bitter water.
Their descendants' blood was spilled like water.
Turn to us.
We're surrounded by troubles like water.
Do not hold back water.
Livraka v'lo liklala. May it bring blessing and no curse.
Amen.
L'chaim v'lo l'mavet.
May it bring life.
And not death.
Amen.
L'stofa v'lo l'gazon.
May it bring bounty
And not famine.
Amen.
Okay, so water is life, and we have to have God give us the water in due time. And due time is from Sukkot and on, and this is when we begin praying. Now, wait a second, what happened here? Do you see this? Okay. But there was a problem, especially in Second Temple period. People coming from afar Okay, it took them a week, 2 weeks, sometimes more to get to Jerusalem. They spent the week in Jerusalem. Now it's going to take them a week or two or more to go back. They don't really want the rain to begin immediately the next day. So they would say the blessing of the water, the request for the rain, but then in their hearts it would say, please God, if you could postpone it in 2 weeks till we get home safely on dry roads and dry paths. So the great priest, the high priest, during that day of the first prayer of rain, he would say out loud so everybody can hear, may it be thy God, our Lord, that this year is full of heavy rains, and may the prayers of the wayfarers not enter your presence. Don't listen to the travelers. Don't listen to the tourists who always want it to rain, but not today. Okay. And I know as a tour guide, I also wish, okay, can it please rain only by night or when I finish this group? But of course, the land is first in line, and we have to think of the land and not of the tourists. Okay. The main commandment of Sukkot, except for being in Jerusalem, is to be happy, to make sure that everybody's happy. The Levites, the foreigners, the orphans, the widows, anybody who lives with us. Okay? And one of the ways of sharing this happiness is around the altar. Okay? Singing and reciting psalms and going around. Again, we're going to this circle thing, this chug or chag, and very much like, I don't know if it was a happy occasion, but the dramatic occasion of Jericho, for 6 days, only one circle, and then in the 7th day, 7 circles. And now we're getting to the Second Temple period, okay? Solomon's temple was destroyed, we went to Babylon, we came back, Nehemiah built a small temple, it holds for 500 years, and then comes Herod and builds this amazing structure that we've heard so much about every time we come to Israel and every time we have a Zoom about Second Temple period. The most beautiful building in the Roman Empire, and you have travelers, tourists, and pilgrims coming from everywhere of the known world at that time, because everywhere the Roman Empire was, there were also Jews. So they even came as far as Morocco or France. So they went on this very, very long pilgrimage, and they reached Jerusalem, and they double the population of Jerusalem. Now, Herod had things organized, for instance, the supply of water, all the aqueducts that he built from far and near, making sure that all these pilgrims have enough water. But you know how it is in very touristic places, in Paris and Venice and in Jerusalem and Tel Aviv. The crowds and the pressure of people and the line to get to the Western Wall area, going through the security gates. And here miracles happened. Pregnant women didn't suffer a miscarriage. The rain didn't bother the celebrations. Of course, they didn't begin praying to the rain until after the celebration is over. And there was no bad smell from the altar, and no smoke and no fire. And the most amazing of all, nobody complained. It is difficult to me to find lodging in Jerusalem. Now, all of you who ever tried to find a hotel room at the high holidays knows that this is a miracle, really is. And if you're coming with a big family and you need several rooms, it is a big miracle. And to strengthen this, one of the amazing findings that were found in the city of David is this stone inscription. It's written in Greek because Second Temple period Greek was the international language of this side of the Mediterranean. And it tells us about building this synagogue, which we know does not mean a house of prayer or a house of ritual. It means a place of gathering, exactly like the word in Hebrew, Beit Knesset, the place of gathering. It's a community place. It's like a JCC. And yes, it had a hostel. Okay, a community center also prepared, also equipped to receive and accept all these pilgrims coming. And we know from other sources that there were at least 18 such synagogues in Jerusalem. So here we know that there were hostels and there were hotels. And of course, people also opened their homes to people. So that is, as you get to Jerusalem, you find lodging. And then you have to get to the temple itself. And even if you live on this side where the Jewish quarter is today, you might not take the shortest way to the temple. You might go the longer way, go all the way down through the city of David and begin your pilgrimage here at the pool of Shiloh, at this very low place. First of all, it will give you topographically a voyage that is ascending, that is going up. And this is an ascent. It wasn't easy. It's not easy today either. But it's going from this fresh source of water going all the way up to Temple Mount. Now, what we have of this Shiloh pool today are just these steps, the northern steps. All of this area of the pool is till recently in the hands of a Greek Orthodox church. Now, the Jewish body that is in charge of the city of David just completed buying this area, and they're planning to excavate and open the whole size of the pool. There's a dispute about how kosher that deal was of buying. We'll not get into that, but imagine in a few years we will be able to see the whole pool of Shiloh. One more thing, the source of the water comes from a spring over here, which is called Gihon, going all the way back to the first temple period, to 700 BC. Hezekiah, preparing for the Assyrian siege, takes the water from here and moves it to the other side of the spur. And he sends the water, in Hebrew, lishloach. And from that point on, we stop calling the water Gihon, and we begin calling it Shiloach in Hebrew. Later on, it became Siloam in Greek and Silwan in Arabic. It all comes from the fact that Hezekiah sent the water from this side to the other side. So here again, two other angles of what we have today, only the northern steps, but you can imagine, if this is one side of a square, you can imagine the whole square, the complete square. Now notice the steps. You have 3 small ones and then a wide one, and then 3 small ones and then a wide one, and it goes on in these series. First of all, because the spring, the Gihon, is a kind of spring that is not constant. It goes in pulses. So sometimes there's a lot of water and sometimes less. So no matter what level the water is, whether the water reaches this point or higher or lower, there is always an easy way to stand at the side of the pool because there's a widening. So that's one thing. And it's also a kind of crowd control. Okay, and it also makes you think of your step, and we'll see this theme of thinking of your steps and crowd control and making sure people don't fall on each other. We'll see that again and again in Herodian buildings. Okay, so this is what we imagine the pool looked like, and we can imagine the very famous Jew, Yehoshua, the son of Miriam and Yosef, Mary and Joseph from Nazareth, when he went to his pilgrimage to Jerusalem, he went several times in his life. The most famous is the Passover, where at the end he was crucified. But he also went several times before. And the New Testament tells us that one of his time was Sukkot. And he, according to the custom, began his pilgrimage within Jerusalem. The last few hundred yards, he first went down to the pool and then went up the pilgrimage road that we're going to show you. And then he had there the miracle of healing of the blind. Now, in the excavations along the pool, there's this big sidewalk, there's this big paved area, and the excavators started digging at this point and another point closer to us. And on two of these points, they found a road going up. I'll get back to that. Okay, going back to the Jewish sources, another aspect of the ceremony in Jerusalem is the water. We are rejoicing. We know that we're going to begin praying for the rain on the seventh day, and we are celebrating water. And only this week, we do not pour wine and we do not pour oil on the altar. We are pouring water, and the water comes from this pool, from the Shiloh. And whoever has not seen Simchat Bet HaShoava, has not seen happiness, has not seen a celebration in his life. And people would come down, collect the water from here, and begin their way up to the temple. So this is one of the two roads, the more eastern road that they found. A few tens of yards to the west of us, they began, the excavators, another tunnel, and it took them a while to understand that this is one road, that it began 30 meters wide. It's a boulevard, it's an avenue. As it goes up to the temple, it becomes narrower and narrower. At the narrowest point, it's 8 meters. 8 meters is still wide for Second Temple period. If you look at old cities today, if you look at Jaffa, you have alleys that are 1.5 meters, 2 meters wide. So 8 meters is still wide, but begins with almost 30 meters. And look at the excellent work here. Look, this is not for a house, and yet it's so well engraved. It's so smooth. It's so precise. The rocks are so well put one next to each other, and they stayed intact despite all the destructions and earthquakes and such quality building. Now, this is where it becomes a little more narrow. Excavators today we can't show you the whole width. We can't dig the whole 30 meters because there's the city of David, the Arab neighborhood of Siloam over our head. Now, if we try to open the whole 30 meters, it will collapse in. As it is, when it's two separate sections, every inch of the way that is excavated has to be reinforced with steel and cement, and has to have engineers checking it and rechecking, making sure that whoever walks through the tunnel is safe, and all the people who live above, whether Jews or Arabs, have their houses safe so they don't collapse. This is an amazing engineering project today. Discovering this, we have to remember that during Second Temple period, this was open to the air, open to the sky. Okay. Again, something that some of you can appreciate. When you excavate, there's a lot of schlepping to do, carrying the full buckets. There's a long way. You can't just open an opening to pull the buckets out wherever you want, because there are houses above your head. So it has to be in a very specific point. The further in and the further deep you dig, the point of taking all the buckets out becomes further. So they've actually made this conveyor belt, which is, it's an amazing patent. And when you finish excavating here and your bucket is full, you hang it over here, and the conveyor belt takes it all the way to where there's a lift, and somebody just has to take them off the conveyor belt. And then the empty buckets come back down the other side, and somebody has to pull them back. Again, it's an amazing, amazing project with a lot of effort and a lot of money that was put in. And we're continuing our way up, and we're talking about the artifacts and the items, the small items. This is the main highway to the main tourist attraction. Now, like today, when you go in the Cardo in the old city, or think of any boulevard leading to a main attraction anywhere in the world, you have the souvenir shops and general shops, and you have the crowds, and people lose things. People lose small items. They lose coins. They lose bottles of perfume. They lose jewelry. So all of these were found in the cracks. You can imagine as people go in the crowd, they will find them. This is a unique item over here. A handful of these were found around Israel. This is a measuring table, and it wasn't only one piece. There were few more pieces, and along the other pieces were other holes in other measurements, in other sizes, in other volumes. And this was the official in charge of the market, making sure that, at least in liquids, people are selling the right amount and they're not cheating. Okay, so this market was inspected, and there was a legal measurement that you had to correspond to. So such a table. Two other tables that are not business, but they're just for pleasure. They're just beautiful. Two separate tables. They don't connect to each other. Two different kind of decorations, two different styles, but you see the effort. Whoever got either this table with these beautiful, colorful stones, or this table with amazing engravings here, had money. People, Jerusalem, towards the end of the Second Temple, from the investment that Herod put in it, people made money. People could afford very expensive stuff. More of the amazing findings. Very, very famous. This golden bell. It has a little chime inside, and you can actually hear it ring. And we suppose, we have faith that this is the true assumption, that this was actually sewn to the clothes of the great priests, because on Yom Kippur, when he went into the holiest of holies, people needed to know that he is alive. So whenever he moved and he had bells on his cloak, people knew that he was still alive. If they didn't hear the bells ringing for a while, they would have to pull him out from the holiest of holies. And just generally speaking, as he walked down the street, his cloak made such a very specific kind of noise that everybody knew that the great priest is coming along. So you can imagine during the high pilgrimage with all the crowd and people shoving and pushing each other, that such a bell would fall off the road and into the cracks of the pavement. This is the other side of this rock with a menorah is a sundial. People needed to know when to go up to the temple for prayers on a regular basis, not just on pilgrimage. Again, the jewelry, the weights, the measurements, and this oil lamp, quite ordinary, quite simple. We find these kinds in many places, but in this case, the thread was still here, the wick was still here, and the ash was still there, and it was stationed in a crack between two stones in a wall in what we believe to be one of the shops. And we can actually imagine that this lamp was lit till the very, very last moment of the revolt. And what extinguished it was the walls and the ceiling falling on the whole room as the destruction. So this is something that was alive and lit till the very, very last moment. Another thing that having to do with the revolt and the destruction of Jerusalem, as we make our way up, we are walking on the street. But Herod, he said, thought of everything. He thought of a water supply to the city. He also wanted to make sure that in case of rain, and generally speaking sewage, it is taken out of the city in the correct manner. And he could not allow himself, like other ordinary roads, that this pilgrimage road would have sewage streaming on it. So he actually built a sewage canal underneath the road. And this is another option. When you tour Jerusalem, you can actually, for a few hundred meters, walk in the sewage canal underneath the road. Now, as it is with sewage canals, whenever there's a war, whenever there's a revolt, you have people hiding. There are many other cases in history and other places in the world, people hiding in the sewage. So at the end of the Great Revolt, the Roman commander commands to search the people, as Josephus calls them, in the mines, in the tunnels underneath the city. And here we have an amazing account that what Josephus, this historian, who we excavate with the book in our hands, whether it's Caesarea, Masada, and of course in Jerusalem, his account is exactly what we found. People were hiding in the sewage with complete cooking pots. They were planning to stay alive. They brought with them equipment so they can cook, so they can continue. Next to them, skeletons were found, and this Roman knife. Okay. So the bricks of the sidewalk here were smashed open. So we can really imagine the moment of the Romans breaking the sidewalk to get underneath to the canal and finding the people who are trying to escape the city. We can imagine that Herod began this project of this amazing road together with the big project of Temple Mount and the temple itself. But he probably did not complete it. When we look underneath the stones, the coins that we find are from the year 22, coins of Pontius Pilate that we know was in the year 29, 30. Okay, the same governor who reigned during the time of Jesus, of Yeshua. And we find these coins coming from Tyre, which we know that at that time was the international currency. You couldn't just bring any kind of tax to Jerusalem. You couldn't just bring a coin from Egypt or a coin from Babylonia. Whenever you reached Jerusalem, you had to change it to this chetzi shekel, the half a shekel of Tyre, and then that is the tax you gave. It's mentioned in Jewish sources, mentioned in the New Testament, and here we find this same coin, the coin that is mentioned as the tax of the temple. We find it in the pavement. About 2/3 of the way up, there's this little pyramid between the shops. This is the highway. Along the sides are all the shops, and then there's this opening between the shops, like a little plaza, and this pyramid. What the archaeologist is presuming, he doesn't have a sign, he doesn't have an explanation, but this is an assumption that this is Even HaToen, the stone of claims. Whenever anybody lost anything, and again, think of the crowds, think of the multitude of people, think of all the things that you misplaced. If you found something, you would bring it to the lost and found spot. So this is an assumption. We can also imagine people who want to speak their minds, people who would like to give a speech about the meaning of pilgrimage, about Parashat HaShavua, about whatever, standing here and speaking to the crowds in the little plaza that was made here. And I couldn't hold myself but comparing it to other places in the world we know, like Hyde Park. Okay. Finally, you walk from the pool, up the steps, you pass the shops, you pass Even HaToen, you reach the area of the temple, and there's an obstacle. The way Herod built the temple, it's like a cliff here. The road comes up from here, from the bottom right corner of the picture, and then how do you get into the complex? And there are two ways. There's a way from the south with these steps, and then from these steps, tunnels that bring you out here. Or another way is going up through this interchange, known as Robinson